Okay, we're good to go.
Well, good evening and welcome to the September 22nd, 2020 board meeting of Everett Public Schools Board of Directors. This meeting is hereby called to order. We will now, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge of allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First item of, roll call, please.
President Mason,
Present.
Vice President Lassane,
Present.
Director Berg,
Present.
Director Mitchell,
Present.
Director Nichols,
Present.
Student Representative Hussein, and Student Representative Pilch-Besson.
Present.
Thank you. First item of business is the adoption of tonight's agenda. Dr. Salzman, please provide an overview.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Board Directors, and to our public, good evening. Tonight's agenda contains the following: the Superintendent's report, a segment for board comments, a segment for public comments, a segment for routine business, a segment for strategic progress monitoring, a segment for new business, and upcoming agenda items. Since publishing the agenda, no changes have been made. The board may elect to change the order by business by majority vote of the members. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Sorry, I kind of stopped mid-sentence there, threw you a bit. It has been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. And the agenda is adopted, which takes us to 5.0 recognitions. And this evening, we do not have a recognition. So we will move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Salzman.
Thank you, and good evening, everybody. First of all, I want to thank the community again for following the masks and adhering to the guidelines. And as long as we continue being safe, these numbers will go down, and I do appreciate that. I want to share just a few items this evening. One is we had our Let's Connect sessions last night with all three regions. I want to thank staff, the community, the regionals, and our principals, and even students that were engaged. We had a total of 307 participants, and we got overall feedback. Our parent university has taken off quite well, and our community appreciates that. And there's been some supportive engagement of our teachers. So again, teachers, you're doing an amazing job. We continue to take feedback on improvement. We still had some tech issues on our bandwidth, and we continue to look at that, and we take that into consideration every time. And then continuing with our Zoom lens to make sure that all our Zooms are set up. So the feedback that we got for our community has been very beneficial. We will do this monthly through the COVID, and even when we eventually or hopefully can go back in any form of hybrid, we'll continue to engage our community. I do want to mention that all our teachers are working so hard, and so are our students. When you go on these Zoom classes and seeing our students participate, and as I visited many classrooms, just to call out a few, Mrs. Polk at Cedarwood, as she was reading to her students and engaging, making the lessons fun, and Ms. Thompson at Lowell Elementary, what she was doing with her students engaging. And then our next rounds of middle schools and high school visits, we know we're seeing great things. But to our teaching staff, nobody predicted this work. I was talking to another superintendent the other day. It's been 100 years since the great flu, and nobody's written this book. So together we get through this. You're doing amazing work, and to our community, your support and encouragement and feedback helps make a difference for the lives of all our children. So thank you, and everybody be well and be safe.
Thank you. We will go ahead and move to board and student representative comments. And if you just want to give me a wave, if you have something to say, please do so. Director Mitchell.
Yeah, since nobody else is speaking up, I was pausing for a little bit. I really don't have much to report, but I just want to thank the district for communications for putting out the voter day today. I don't know where I saw or where I heard it, and I tried to Google it before I came on, but sometimes finding stuff is hard. That I heard sometime if you're more likely to be a lifelong voter if you vote in a presidential year. And I couldn't find the proof of that, but it's something I heard one time. I voted in a presidential year, and my daughter gets to vote in a presidential year. So let's see if I can make her a lifelong voter, because I have been. The second thing is, I know it's on the agenda later. This Friday is the WASDA governance meeting, where we will help set WASDA's priorities for the legislative session this year. And so hopefully we'll talk later about how we want Friday to go. Usually it is just the legislative rep plus or minus the superintendent, maybe plus or minus a district leader, just so that we can vote based on how we think the district would want WASDA to have their priorities. So we'll figure out, all of us that are attending on Friday, how we want to do it as a group, which I think is just lovely since there's no travel involved. And then but we will set our district priorities for the legislature closer to the legislative term. So to be clear, this is just helping set WASDA's priorities as they legislate for the entire state. So thank you so much.
And thank you for that update on the WASDA legislative session coming up. Other directors? Director Berg.
Hello, I will kind of echo what Director Mitchell said. Happy National Voting Day. I'm wearing my Vote 2020. Hopefully everybody is encouraging loved ones to register to vote, and encouraging our students that you can now register at 16. So not just when you're getting your driver's license, but you can actually register at 16, so that when you're 18, you will automatically get that first ballot in the mail. So that's an awesome thing that our state provides. The other thing I wanted to talk about was, and just thank Dr. Catherine Matthews for sitting down with me and Director Nichols today to walk through Performance Matters. It was great to look at data, this new system, and how we're going to be able to utilize data. And it just kind of got me back in the swing of things, of some of the cool things that that we're able to do for our teachers and for our kids to make it better. So that was awesome. I also want to say just a shout out to our parents. I know I'm a parent right now, and I'll tell you that first week of school was hectic, and it was, you know, interesting and new, and we were reimagining this adventure. Well, now we're on like week 2 and 3, and I'm tired. And so I know a lot of parents out there are probably feeling tired like me, and maybe the shine has kind of gotten off this new adventure, but I just want to encourage you, it's worth it. Even when you're having bad days, you are doing amazing. Even when your kids aren't seeming like they're not paying attention or not getting anything, they are. So I know as we go on this adventure, it's going to be difficult, but I'm just really hoping that everybody just sticks with us, and we're going to come out better than we went into this thing. And then lastly, I just also want to echo what Director Mitchell said about the WASDA conference. One of the things I did have to give up was my leadership role in WASDA because of the accident. So I'm no longer the DA1 legislative representative. That position's open, so I'm encouraging my fellow board members to run for it now that we're getting to that running for WASDA position seasons, because it'd be great to have a district our size represented in WASDA leadership. They're an amazing organization, and that's a role that I sorely miss, but again, it was something I had to give up. So thank you, and yeah, that's it.
Great, thank you. And glad to see you healing along as well. Other directors or student representative? Director Lassane, would you like to go?
Please, thank you. I do want to say thank you. I had the opportunity with Dr. Bolton today and our new CTE admin person, Anthony Anderson. I don't know if he goes by Tony, but Anthony Anderson. And I would like to say it's great to be able to have that opportunity to meet one-on-one with some of the new employees to our district. Thank you so very much for asking me to join in those conversations. I'm looking forward to being able to see all of you when we are in person at the district office or throughout the district at different schools and classrooms. I'm looking forward to that. I also had the opportunity to Zoom in with Emerson. That was just one of those really highlights of the day, having that many kids Zoom in on their first day of school. So that was really important and very much fun. So I am looking forward to having the opportunity when we're all back in class and meeting teachers and meeting new admin folks. So other than that, I don't have any other things. I'm just glad we're off to a good start in school. I'm looking forward to having that hybrid schedules coming out soon, hopefully, and just excited about new beginnings. So thank you.
Thank you. And I know Student Representative Hussein raised her hand. If you'd like to go ahead. Oops, I think you're muted there.
My mic has been working a little iffy. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can't see you now, but we can hear you.
All right. So basically, a lot has been happening over the past few weeks, of course. But this Saturday, we were able to go to the Everett mall, and basically we had a huge stage set up thanks to our building administrators. And we basically had schools such as Jackson, Cascade, and Everett have this huge stage where we would introduce our freshmen. And parents and students came in with their cars, and we told them to honk if they understood. So you would have this loud ring of honks. And yeah, a lot of us expected there to be kind of like a booth, but we were very pleased to see a huge stage set up. So thank you for that, like a huge thank you. And yeah, that's all for my commentary.
Thank you. Another way to reimagine. Student Representative Pilch-Besson. Did I say it right?
Yeah, Pilch-Besson. Yeah, I want to echo that with Amina. I was only there for about an hour in the morning, but it was a really cool event to be a part of. I was there with Jackson's Link Crew, and so there were a lot of student groups there, like there were ASBs and Link Crew. And so it was cool to see some of my peers in like a safe, socially distant way with masks and everything, and a couple teachers and things like that. And of course, really exciting to welcome the freshmen. And then another thing that I just want to, I guess, say thank you and offer some positive feedback on is the only having 3 classes a day, the kind of block schedule has been really nice for a lot of students. It feels a lot less underwhelming to go to 3 classes a day than to 6. And so that's been kind of a de-stressor when things are so hectic and when you're getting used to a new way of doing school. It's definitely not been a not stressful situation, and there is all that classwork that you still have. But one thing that has been helping is the only having 3 classes a day. So I want to thank you guys for making that decision, and at the high school level at least. So thank you.
Thank you. That's great feedback. I appreciate hearing that. I wanted to recognize that this is the first board meeting since school began. I have received so much positive feedback. I know there's some frustrations going on with the launch of school. It's different. And the thing that I often tell people when I'm talking, they ask how it's going, is we're making the best of a situation. And, you know, if we could be in person, we would, but that's just not an option right now. And I'm really appreciating, as I'm seeing the news across the country, in particular college campuses where UC Boulder has had 441 cases of COVID since they opened their doors. And it's a very typical experience for a lot of campuses that are bringing groups of students back quickly together. And it makes me recognize that I appreciate the pace at which we are moving, even though we are all excited to get students back into our building. So thank you for your thoughtful consideration in scheduling and when we'll be able to do this, and for following health guidelines. It's really about the health of everyone involved. And I noticed also the instructional review schedule came out. I'm looking forward to participating in some of those and getting a firsthand view of what instruction looks like during these times. I know that you all are going to do an amazing job reimagining what an instructional review looks like in the time of COVID and Zoom. And I look forward to participating in some of those. So with that, I haven't heard from Director Nichols. I can't see you, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, for some reason my camera is just not didn't load in the beginning of it, so I've been trying to figure that out.
Okay.
But briefly, got to hand out meals at Whittier and Hawthorne over the last couple of weeks, and it was really great to work with our nutrition staff. They just their level of dedication to the students was really great to see. I mean, they knew most of the families coming up. They knew the kids. It was really, really great. And just want to remind everybody that, if you haven't taken advantage or don't know about the meal program, please go to our website, register for meals by Monday, and then you can pick them all up on Wednesday.
Great. Thank you for that reminder. We're getting a lot of meals out into our community. Very, very rewarding. Glad that we're able to do that. Okay, I think that's all of us. So we will go ahead and move on to 8.0 on the agenda, which is public comments. Do we have any public comments this evening?
No, we don't have any public comments.
Okay, great. Thank you. That takes us to our consent agenda. And Dr. Salzman, may you please give us an overview of tonight's consent agenda?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The board's consent agenda includes repetitive business items such as meeting minutes, personnel actions, expense vouchers, surplus lists, gifts, grants, and recurring contracts. Sometimes it includes items that occur less frequently but are of a routine business nature. These items are usually reviewed by the board in the Friday report, 1 or more weeks before the board meeting. This gives directors time to ask staff questions or to consider a discussion about the policy implications of those items. The board votes on the consent agenda in a single motion. By its definition, a consent agenda is not debatable. In the case of this consent agenda, the superintendent's office received no questions regarding items on the agenda. The consent agenda is presented and published for board approval.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved by Director Nichols and seconded by Director Berg. Would any director like to remove an item from the consent agenda and place it in the new business section of the agenda? Hearing no requests, we'll go ahead and move to the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The consent agenda is approved. And that takes us to strategic progress monitoring. And tonight we get an overview of instructional materials, the adoption schedule. And I believe Dr. Boughton is going to walk us through that.
That is accurate. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm really excited to be here tonight to be able to present some of the overview of our instructional materials. And Darlene, do you share that presentation or do you want me to do that?
You'll do that.
Thank you. So I'm gonna bring that up right now. Hopefully you are seeing this presentation, except I need to present it.
That's Brandon O. He's my son's friend.
Let's try that. Hang on just 1 second. I think we had this happen before. Now let me share my screen. Okay, are you seeing the instructional overview? Is that accurate? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to double check. So good evening. Thank you guys so much for the time this evening to review instructional overview, the instructional materials and overview of the adoption schedule. So tonight we're going through just to review the current long-term instructional materials for the adoption needs, and then kind of the drivers for why we've decided to review those pieces and why the adoption schedule exists for those particular content areas. Establish common understanding of potential financial implications. So curriculum costs money, and we want to make sure that we have a good plan for what that looks like, and then outlining our next steps for that process. This does align with our strategic goals, specifically in helping each and every student graduate from high school ready for college, career, and life, but also making sure that students have equitable access to rigorous curriculum content and our learning outcomes. So we want to make sure that we provide a coordinated and aligned curriculum content so that we have all students who have access to rigorous instruction. It also helps us to demonstrate the cultural proficiency and reach that strategic goal. More specifically, with our key performance outcomes, we want all of our students to graduate, again, college, career, and life ready. So we need good, rigorous curriculum to help support that. But also, you'll see not just reading, writing, and math, but you'll see things that also incorporate arts, the language, culture, and histories at all levels. That's a big piece of what we believe here in Everett Public Schools, that it's about the whole child and making sure that we have a wide variety of curriculum to support the good learning that's happening in our schools, either in person or remote. So when we are doing our adoption materials, we always are thinking about how do we make sure we align with the Common Core state standards, as well as the 21st century skills to help provide all students with a rich experience that is similar whether you are in the north end of the district, the south end of the district, or anywhere in between. The diversity of learning modalities and platforms is also critically important, but one of the pieces that we really want to ensure is that students have a curriculum and content that is inclusive and represents multiple perspectives. And I'll speak specifically to that in a couple of content areas, but we want to make sure that our curriculum represents the population that we serve, but also making sure that we're not just representing one dominant culture when we are talking about our curriculum and what we're teaching in our classrooms. We also want our students to have high quality text access, and some of that we found is challenging when we talk about whether we're buying actual textbooks or licenses for ebooks as well. We've gotten kind of a good experience with that just this last few months. So the other pieces that when we think about adopting our curriculum is we really are thinking about how are we making sure that we have bias, fairness, cultural relevance, and digital citizenship in mind so that we make sure that our work aligns to some of those pieces, but that we're also giving and ensuring access to our special populations. Our special education students are always general education students first, and wanting to make sure that the curriculum that we adopt has access for those students to participate in that as well. And then the other piece when we think about curriculum adoption is it's not just about the actual content or curriculum, it's also about how we instruct that. So for example, when we think about social studies curriculum, it's not just having multi-perspective curricula, it's also teaching in a culturally responsive way so that we can optimize the reach that we have on our students. We also make sure that when we are looking at our curricula for adoption and the instructional materials overview is that we're really thinking about helping to support the equity and access components that we have in the district. It's really fostering collaboration with our instructional practitioners, and then it's continually looking at the continuous improvement process. So how are we helping to close opportunity gaps and how are we using the curriculum to support that? We keep TPEP in mind, that's the Teacher Principal Evaluation Project, and we think about how do we help leverage the curriculum to make sure that teachers are able to get to that distinguished level performance in the classroom to support student learning and achievement. And then of course the big piece, technology integration. Now with students at one-to-one, we want to make sure that our curriculum and adoption and our adopted materials will actually be supported in our digital platforms and that students are able to utilize the digital tools with the curriculum to optimize their learning as well. So today we've got a 5-year forecast of our potential instructional materials and needs. You can see we've got the 6 content areas that we're focused on in the adoption process. And I'll go through each one of them, kind of give you an overview as well as the breakdown of the budget. First on deck is math. We are currently in the implementation year for Algebra 1, 2, Geometry, Stat, and then some of our AP mathematics. We'll be looking at next year for the adoption. So we're engaging in those processes this year. And we are looking at specifically with those AP Calc, Stats, and Pre-Calc, as well as our K-5 that we're looking at the adoption this year, is really focusing on helping to close that achievement gap in mathematics that's been pervasive. Establishing targets to help make sure that we have students that they're closing that gap on and actually helping them to achieve at high levels, as well as intervention and enrichment to support our special populations. Again, our special education students are always general ed students first, and we want to make sure that we can support them with that. We're looking at the K-5 adoption as a phase 1 this year with a total cost this year estimated at about $1.1 million. That is for all kindergarten through 5th grade across the district. So it is a pretty significant cost, but it is actually one we need so that we can help to have coordinated and aligned curriculum across the district, providing equity and access to rich and rigorous math instruction. With the STEM, science, and engineering, we are in the implementation year for both Chem and AP Environmental Science. Next year we'll be engaging in those pieces. The core 6 through 8 is the adoption process we're also engaging in, so that we can make sure that we have alignment to the NGSS, which is the Next Generation Science Standards. It's what we consider kind of like the equivalent of Common Core for science and technology. The other driver for our science curriculum is the implementation of the WCAS, which is the Washington Comprehensive Assessment of Science. And it is given in grades 5, 8, and 10. And this assessment tool is helping to drive some of where we want to go with alignment to the NGSS, but it is a component that is a driver for our new science content curriculum. And I will tell you, I did need to actually correct that. It is grades 5, 8, and 11 for the WCAS. So my apologies on that. When we're doing our science and engineering adoption, we are also looking at the connections that we have for CTE as well. So that's an area that we want to make sure that we have connections to as we look at that adoption for CTE. The 3 big adoption pieces that we have coming up are the engineered and advanced manufacturing, health and medical careers, and information communication and technology. And this is all to support the career pathways work that we have been engaged in for the last few years, but continuing that work around the adoption of instructional materials so that we can make sure that kids have that content and it's aligned to our pathways. In social studies, this is an area that we needed to do some adjustment of budget. We did not have originally adoption money set aside in this, and we've made some budget specifically for ethnic studies. We're targeting an ethnic studies class at the 7th grade level so that all students in all middle schools will be able to have it as part of their core history instruction. The vision for this is that it would be the flip side of Washington State history, which is not just a graduation requirement, but that's one of the semesters of 7th grade history in Everett Public Schools. And we are looking to modify the US and World Geography content that we have as the opposite semester in 7th grade to include the ethnic studies component. So we're looking at an adoption schedule where we have about $100,000 in costs for this year, and then looking at an additional $50,000 for next year as we look at how do we also include some elective opportunities for students who are currently in the high school who have not yet, who were not able to take that 7th grade content. So the development of 2 classes, and then we don't have additional core content adoption in this, but we are also looking at supplemental pieces to support United States history, government, that we have in all of our other history classes, the US history classes in elementary, middle, and high school as well. For our world languages, we this year just are adopting the German 1 through 3. We did a presentation around that a couple of board meetings ago. And also world language K5 is on the docket for 2023-24. And that's an opportunity for us to explore how do we bring that second language experience down into the elementary schools as well, to help to align our world readiness language standards, but also giving students the opportunity to experience language prior to getting into middle school or in high school. So giving that early on so that we have some opportunities to help grow students' skills in that area. Visual and performing arts, we suspended actually some of our visual arts last year, so we're moving forward in the 21-22 school year so that we can include some tech integration, new modalities and platforms with those pieces. We have visual arts K8 and 9-12 on the docket, as well as music in 2 phases. Phase 1 in the 21-22 school year, and then the second phase of that in 22-23, along with theater adoption, for a grand total of $644,000 in the next 5 years. And then for special education, most of this functional academics that we're looking at really helps to focus and support our life skills classrooms. Then these are students with profound intellectual disabilities, and they often are concurrent with severe to profound deficits in their adaptive skill development. So we are looking at this functional academics curricula this year in a select group. So a phase 1 just to try things out. It's got some progress monitoring components that are important in this content area, and really wanting to make sure that we can support students so that we can give them opportunities for educational employment and independent living. In phase 2, we will look at broadening the impact of this curriculum, and that's why there's a two-phase implementation for this content for about $139,000. So generally, overall, our instructional costs over the next 5-year forecast is about $5.6 million, with consumable materials at about $600,000 a year over the next 2 years. And those are the consumables for currently adopted curricula, like Springboard, for example, the consumable materials with there. And the numbers in the materials cost estimate takes into account the 10% annual growth, inflation, and interest in particular content areas. So as we continue to grow things like world language, we may see some of those pieces increase, and the estimate is taking that into consideration. The other piece that we want to ensure is that our curriculum is inclusive of all cultures and reflects the families and students within our communities, and a continued focus on social justice issues. So one of the things that we did talk a little bit about is that we have currently adopted United States history courses that we are continuing to look at evaluating and supplementing so that we can have broader perspectives and not just presenting materials from a dominant culture perspective. So we continue to work on those pieces that are supplemental, which is not in part of the 5-year forecast. So we will continue to do those pieces to support our students as we are developing and responding to some of the priorities that we've identified with some of our student groups. And then the increasing innovation and technology that we are experiencing helps us to refine the practices that we have, but also we need to make sure that we are meeting the needs of our 21st century learners. And I think in the course of the last 6 months, I've really shifted my perspective on some of this, as we have some needs that we never had anticipated prior to this. But we're going to continue to assess priority and timing of the available, the quality curriculum and materials, and adjust the costs as needed as things arise as well. So our next steps is we're going to go ahead and do an additional review of the content that we have in all of the curricular areas to ensure that we have those multiple perspectives and the curriculum is inclusive. And to do that, I'd love to say it's just me, but it is actually a broader audience that we're including. So we're working with teachers. We plan to present to community and to parents to go through some of those processes to gather more feedback and information and make sure that we're making decisions that are best for students and supportive of our goals and initiatives. We will continue to review additional curriculum as needed. And then further coordination of the needs with the long-term fiscal planning. Of course, you know, as we look at what our enrollment is and what our basic ed supplements and allocations will be, we may need to make some minor adjustments, but we will continue to do that. And we're going to continue to monitor the short and long-term implications of ebooks. So, you know, we're really looking now, especially in the last 6 months, is it necessary that we actually do a full textbook adoption, or do we start looking at just ebooks and or a hybrid model of both, right? One of the things that we know is that a lot of times kids aren't lugging around books like they used to, and with the fact that we have one-to-one devices, kids can easily access text online, as well as anytime a text has an update or there's a misprint or they need to add information in, those publishing companies have opportunities to be able to keep that updated, relevant, so that we're not talking about 15-year-old textbooks anymore. So I've left some time here for some questions for the board directors, if there's something that I can answer.
Thank you. Directors, I'm assuming you have questions. I have a whole bunch, but I'm going to let you go first and get all my questions answered for you. Can you, would it be possible to remove the last slide there so we can?
Yeah. You want me to go ahead and stop sharing, Caroline? Is that perfect?
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, student representatives or directors. Questions? Director Mitchell.
Yeah, sorry, I paused because I'll always speak first, but I just want to give everybody the opportunity. I just want to thank Dr. Bowden for this wonderful presentation. And, you know, our Ted Wenta would have loved this, and he's always in my thoughts. But one question I have is, first, I appreciate the math number because that is really our highest population, is why that number is so high, correct? K through 5 is our highest number of students.
So, yeah, sorry. Yeah, that is so high. Yes, because that is encompassing all kindergarten, all 6th grade levels for a comprehensive curriculum adoption for all 6th grade levels, where most of these other content areas, it's only 1 or 2 grade levels or one specific, like algebra 2, right?
Okay, so it's proportional. Okay,
correct.
Thank you.
Correct.
And then my second question, and it might be actually a Larry question. We have an outstanding protocol for a curriculum adoption that is really, I believe, really truly followed by the committees. But with our new focus on socially sensitive, inclusive, and accurate topics, and I'm going to just say the word whitewashed, that, you know, I was looking at especially curriculum adoption with the visual arts and everything. Where can we bring in some cultural history, some cultural dance, some cultural music, some cultural things? But as we're going through the policy, is the protocol for adoption, is it possible to adjust that protocol, that if it's not already in there, that inclusiveness to each of our curriculum adoptions, no matter just history, but every opportunity for us to experience the true culture of America?
Yeah, so our board, sorry, Larry, did you want to speak?
Unless you need me.
Well, one of the things that we do, Director Mitchell, is that we do try and take a look at all of the pieces through the procedure 2311, in really taking a look at bias and cultural pieces with it. But the directors that we're working with in each of those content areas, so for example, Callie Spear is the director who oversees literacy and humanities. And so as we are engaging in the beginning of that process and pulling our teams together, it's not just inclusive of 1 or 2 teachers. We're trying to broaden that out to make sure that we have teachers, and using that as a lens through which we look. Who is writing the curriculum and who does this curriculum serve? And so I think those are at the forefront. I think the other piece is also having a much more open and transparent engagement with our community and parents, so that we're through, as we're stepping through, I mean, the board or the procedure 2311 does allow for a committee of people to be, we bring it to the public and we bring it to families. But I think one of the pieces that we have a vested interest in is bringing it to families, public, and students early on in the process, so that they can help to contribute and provide feedback, so that we can make sure that we are looking at it through multiple lenses. Larry,
No,
did I
that's lovely.
miss anything?
No, and I think, and honestly too, I think in this virtual era, especially if we can get those ebooks, then people, they don't have to come to a place. If they
Right.
can touch them and flip pages and everything in a virtual way, you know, we might get a lot more engagement.
It's one of the things that I think, if we're really intentional about planning and being really open publicly, not just, you know, posting it on the web page, but really engaging the community in authentic ways where we can bring them in and help to and gather feedback in a meaningful way, I think it will help us to provide better content and delivery systems to our families and students.
Yes, so thank you. Those were my questions.
I would say thank you as well on that topic, because as I think about, you know, the policy's written to take a lot of this into account, but it's really much more in the execution of it. And I think, you know, the awareness that perhaps, you know, the word authentic, and I appreciate Dr. Salzman's leadership. I feel that that community involvement is becoming a more authentic process, and I appreciate that. And I look forward to seeing how that gets woven into curriculum adoptions as well.
Great.
Other directors or student representatives?
Well, I've got a couple questions. So mine was mostly around, just so I'm getting just an understanding of the curriculum adoption process for the district, just because I'm new to this role. So what I'm looking at is that you're, you know, saying, look, it's a $5.5 million ask over a 5-year period. Is there just a regular budgeted amount right now in our budget for curriculum adoption? So like, for instance, some districts say, look, we know curriculum rolls over every 7 years, so we're gonna save, you know, $800K, $1 million every year to curriculum adoption in addition to consumables. And I guess the first question is, do we have that? And is this in addition to that?
I'm going to ask if our chief financial officer can assist me with that piece, because I'm not as familiar with the actual annual budgeting of that, since this is my first year as CAO. Jeff, can you help to respond to Director Berg?
Yes, on an annual basis, when we accomplish our 4-year fiscal outlook, we integrate this plan into it for future years. When you adopted the budget, we did, as Dr. Bowden mentioned, delay one of the adoptions for budgetary purposes. So in general, there is a pipeline for adoption. And as you can see, when you look at the detailed plan, it varies from year to year. And we assess the availability of resources each year to support it to the extent that it's presented.
Okay, so I guess my question would be, with this particular presentation, and first off, thank you for it. I love it. It totally hits all the bells and whistles of what I think we've been kind of talking about in previous meetings. So would this be in addition to what we've got in there? This would be what we're adopting over this period, over the 4 or 5 year period.
It's not in addition to, it's modified. In a given year, it may be less than the prior year, or it may be more than the prior year. So yes, this is integrated into the current budget. And as we build the following year budget, we decide to the extent that we add, or to the extent that it gives us some room, always in keeping in mind what the 5-year plan is and how it aligns with our overall 5-year plan.
Okay. So then second question, consumables and the $600K for consumables. And I guess I'm not familiar where ebooks and licenses fall. Like, so when I think of an ebook or a license, does that fall in kind of that consumable range because we're continually each year having to do it, or is that built into the budget, that overall year over year adoption budget?
My understanding with ebooks, and I can actually, we have a pretty vast and really really recent experience with ebooks just in the last couple of weeks with some of our vendors. And so my understanding is that some of them are specific, like we buy a site license and then we assign those licenses to students and then we can utilize them. Some of them are like an annual subscription fee. So it really depends on the content curriculum. If it would be helpful, what I can do is in a Friday report is I can provide you with what are subscriptions and what are site licenses. That would give you a better perspective.
I'm actually more interested in just like what they're considered because it's so new, right? Like, so I'm just curious, like, when we're looking at like site licenses, are we going to have to start budgeting for those as consumables, or would we do it in adoption? And that's more just so as we look at these year over year, what we're in tune for, because what we'll probably see and what I'm thinking we're going to see is our consumables go up even when our adoption rates, you know, as our adoption rates go down, right? Like in terms of pricing, because in theory, right, so maybe it'll be $500,000 instead of $1 million adoption for a particular piece of curriculum because each year we're paying $100,000 in consumable licenses or something like that.
And I do think that some of it, again, it depends on the content curriculum. So I know, for example, as we're looking at the K-5 math adoption, one of the critical pieces that we're looking at is, does it have a platform that is compatible with digital delivery? Right. So if we are winding up having to extend this out, or if we have students, like if we wanted to mitigate a student's attendance issue and they wanted to be able to engage in the online math content, would we be able to do that? What would be the cost factor on that? Is it going to be an annual subscription base that would be similar to a consumable, or is it going to be part of the total package when we buy it and it's a license for 5 or 6 years, and then we build in our budgeting around those pieces? Which would be in the consumables, but we'd have to break it out as like an ebook license piece. So I think it's a great question, and I think we can continue to explore it, and it will be on the forefront, especially now as we have so many of our students were fully one-to-one.
Exactly.
It's going to be a pressing piece on our department in making sure that we can deliver the content to students in whatever way best meets their needs.
And that was my last point. Yeah, just as we're going down this digital, and I know our kiddos are digital natives and they love this stuff, but I do think we do have learners still in every community that just likes that feel, and they do better with a book in hand. So just to be conscious of that. So thank you so much for this. It was super helpful.
You're welcome.
I was going to follow on with a financial question as well, as long as we're on the topic. I'm looking at the cost of each individual year, and we have a fairly, given the 5-year projection, a fairly small cost this year, and that's understandable given that we might have some limited budget constraints. But then next year is huge. It's it's like 6 times the amount of this year. Did certain items get pushed out given the uncertainty of funding, and then, it drops down to, again, like half that amount or less the next few years. And so it feels like kind of a big bite in 1 year, both financially and adoption wise, because I know that there's PD that goes into that and such. Could you speak to that either?
Yeah. So some of it, so chemistry was on the slate to be implemented this year. So it was on the adoption slate for last year. But given the closure in March, we've postponed that. So some of our areas, we had postponement because of closure, and it was impractical for us to be able to engage, quite frankly, meaningfully and authentically with our community and our teaching staff during closure to complete some of the adoption. So I know that was with chemistry, visual performing arts was postponed. And so when you have some of those pieces that are postponed, we have to evaluate as a team and as a district, okay, can we spread this out over a little bit longer, or do we have to, where are we in that? So our German adoption that we moved through, the last adoption was well over 15 years ago. We didn't have curriculum that was compatible with digital platform. And so essentially, if we didn't adopt that curriculum, if we didn't move through that process, we would not have been able to serve our students in German 1, 2, 3 very successfully at all. So I think part of it is taking a look at the 5-year forecast and saying, where do we need to have these pieces fit in? Certainly we could look at things like, wow, you know, the K-5 math adoption is really expensive. Could we phase that in 3 years? What makes the most sense? Well, that's a content area where we have students who are underperforming, and we need to do something different, and we must have content that is aligned with the standards. So we want to make sure that we're providing teachers with the content that is coordinated, aligned, and rigorous. So we have to make some of those decisions. So sometimes things get compressed based on the need and based on what happened in the years prior. So in this case, when we postponed some things, it made the bigger bite this next year. And then it kind of levels back out. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yes, thank you. I do have another question, and you touched on it, the K-5 math adoption.
Mm-hmm.
You have a phase 1 and a phase 2. Can you help us understand what is in each phasing and why it's going to, I mean, obviously all adoptions take time to implement and with professional development, but are there things specific to phase 1 versus phase 2?
I think at this time, what we're looking at is we're attempting to defer the cost over 2 years, so it wouldn't be such a significant hit, but that we could at least get started with it. So we're looking at what is that going to be a rollout at certain grade levels the first year, and then in phase 2, doing second year phase, the phase in of additional grade levels, or if it would be, we'd start with a few pilot schools and roll it out. We have not made that decision yet.
Okay, thank you. And then lastly, I'm just curious about the curriculum for visual arts in K-8, given that we don't have art teachers. And what is, you know, I understand music because we have music teachers. Is that something like science kits where it's going to be provided to the classroom teacher to pick that up, or how does that work?
Yes, so some of our elementary schools have art teachers and some of our elementary schools do not have art teachers. So we are looking at what are the arts, the art curriculum that we will adopt could be presented by either a generalist or a specialist. And so we would, I don't know that it would be kit-based like science, but it would be provided to classroom teachers to provide for the visual arts with that in mind. So it's not, you know, I don't know that I have a very clear answer on what that actually looks like, but what we could do is take a look at what are the materials, what does that look like as far as what materials would we be purchasing for schools, or what if it would be just a generalized content.
That would be great, a little follow-up. And you said something that piqued my curiosity. We have art teachers in some schools, but not in other schools.
Yes.
I know we have docents. You know, we sort of went through a phase where art was phased out for budget constraint reasons, but it sounds like we have some back. I would be interested as you provide information on the curriculum to understand which schools have art teachers and why those schools have art teachers versus some that don't.
Sure. I can provide you for some of that information and background in a Friday report.
That would be great. Thank you. Other student representatives or directors?
I have a couple questions, if I may.
Please.
You mentioned supplemental studies for ethnic studies, a supplemental curriculum for ethnic studies, but you said at one point that you don't have a good estimate on how much that would be for, you know, this is a 5-year plan, but you don't know what it would be. The ethnic studies that you have listed on the graph was not for the supplemental material. Can everybody hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Oh, okay, got you. But you can usually, if we are trying to implement something, even if we don't have an estimate, a good estimate for that amount, we do have an idea, or we place something in there so that we can then say, this may grow or this may be reduced, but this is something. So can you explain to me if that ethnic studies you have listed on page 12, is that going to be used for supplemental material in the curriculum we currently have, or is that something else?
This is specifically for core social studies courses in ethnic studies. Supplemental adoption process is a different category, and we have some budget allocated for those pieces. I think the first thing that we are determining right now is reviewing our current content in our history courses and in some of our ELA courses, and looking at what content needs to supplement to make sure that we have those perspectives represented there. So this is the overview instructional materials, an overview for core and adopted curricula. But with supplemental, we have that on a separate budget. We have that on a separate sheet so that we're doing different pieces with that. The first step that we have to take is identifying what we are currently using and also what we're currently implementing in our classes. So we know what our adopted curriculum is in US history. However, what are some other pieces that are currently have been supplemented and what are teachers utilizing before we can build out the plan of what are some components that we need to create as a supplemental piece to have that across all content or all buildings across the district.
Thank you. My second question regards the tools that we have in order to receive remote learning. With curriculum, and I'm not quite sure if we're going to talk it separately with IT, but as we progress and if we have to continue along this path a little longer than what we anticipated, my question is, sometimes certain curriculum has to be delivered on an item or devices different than what we have, especially like for the younger grades. You know, we talked about K through 5, and we talked about special ed. And even if you want to focus in on kindergarten, the devices need to be separate than what we currently have, or they have to be, you know, geared for those particular audiences. How are we engaging IT with spreading curriculum? Because that's very much important as well.
So part of the adoption process in the procedure that's in 2311 specifically addresses the digital resources that that a curricula would encompass. And the LITS team, part of Brian's team, also engages on the adoption curriculum process so that we can ensure that we're not adopting something that can only be used through a certain platform. So like the academics team is really good at instructional practice and content. Brian's team are kind of the resident experts of, can we actually do this on the devices that we have? Or is it going to require some kind of specialized software or hardware? So we really try and bring in our partners in the LITS department, as well as Kelly Clevenger and her team in special education. Part of 2311 also includes them to review how do we ensure that we have access for our students with disabilities and students with special needs. Is this curriculum that we're looking at going to help to meet the needs? And if not, is it still a viable curriculum? Do we need to do some supplementing? How can we address those pieces? So those teams are a critical piece of the adoption process, because like I said, we can look at something and say, this is awesome math curricula, but if it doesn't work with our digital platform and it doesn't work for our special education students, then it can't work for our district and we need to do something different.
Thank you. And you guys are meeting to discuss those things.
They're part of that. They're definitely part of that.
They're part of that exercise so that we can make sure that they are blending their knowledge in with the knowledge for the curricula.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Director Nichols, did you want to add anything or have any questions?
I am very fortunate that you all ask very great questions. So it makes my life easier.
And do either of the student representatives have questions? Okay, hearing no requests, I think we'll go ahead and say one more thank you to Dr. Boughton for a great presentation and a lot of great follow-up information as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
We'll go ahead and move to section 11.0 of the agenda, information and discussion. And tonight we do not have an information or discussion item, which takes us to unfinished business. And we do not have any unfinished business as well. We do have 13.0 new business to discuss. We have quite a few policy reviews, and I will turn it over to Mr. Fleckenstein to take us through those.
Well, good evening. And tonight on our agenda, we have 6 new board policies that have undergone revision, 4 of which are related to address the conditions we are now in remote learning and the COVID pandemic. 2 are directly related to our district's core values of equity, diversity, and respect. So to begin this evening, proposed revisions to policy 2214, alternative learning experience or ALE courses, are to comply with recent changes to the rules that govern alternative learning experience per chapter 392-500 of the Washington Administrative Code. The changes remove the requirement to obtain a parent or guardian's signature documenting their understanding of the difference between home-based instruction and ALE. However, the requirement to notify families of the difference between home-based and ALE programs at the time of enrollment still remains. And in doing so, it's trying to remove barriers for student access. That's the purpose of that. Revisions also include reference to the requirement for submission of an annual report by the district of our ALE program to OSPI. Revisions to policy 2214, alternative learning experience or ALE courses, have been reviewed by legal counsel and the superintendent's executive cabinet prior to tonight's meeting.
Thank you for the
I have one question on this for Mr. Fleckenstein. When we start talking about an additional or a different type of reporting requirements to OSPI, what additional costs or what additional resources would we need in order to implement that report?
As I've displayed on the screen, Director Lassane, to address your question, these are the requirements that are contained within that report to OSPI. And so the costs and purposes of the experience itself would be included in the report. In terms of resources to develop the report, I'm not aware of any additional costs to create such a report from the district's resources, but I'm happy to get that information for you if there are some.
Thank you. I would like that only because it's different than what it was before. And I understand the need to ensure that ALE is removing the barriers and allowing students to do that. But I'm just concerned as to the additional approach of involving OSPI in that reporting requirement. You know, what additional work do we have to do in order to perform that additional report to OSPI? And will it result in barriers for the students or obstacles for the student in that they may not be in class all the time, they may not, they have to report how many hours per week that they spend with the particular course? What kind of barriers might it present? Or does it present any barriers? Because some students take the class or take courses, but don't have to report time. And if time is a problem for KIT students, for example, or kids that are staying at different locations where they live, does this now create barriers for those students?
Well, thank you for your question. This particular change to policy is outlining twofold. One is that we have a obligation to report our program and its structure in its participants and the data that's described here to OSPI. That's a requirement that the district has about reporting its program itself. That, if I understand your question, is not a barrier in any way to students accessing the program. It's just a requirement we have to fulfill annually. The second piece is we are required to ensure that students are attending and we take attendance, even though we have to still track that and to report that. That's not necessarily creating a barrier for students. It's as identified here in the policy revision, we do have to provide valid justification as to why a student may miss the weekly contact requirements for ALE, but we still have those necessary components that are outlined in our attendance policy, which I'll be presenting a bit later here this evening.
Okay, thank you.
Do any other directors have questions?
Nope.
Okay, hearing none, we will go ahead and move policy 2214, alternate learning experience courses, to second reading. And that takes us to 13.02, policy 3121.
Thank you. Proposed revisions to policy 3121, enrollment and attendance records, are provided to comply with House Bill 1191 concerning school notifications. House Bill 1191 modified the notification requirements to no longer include former students who are now over the age of 21 or who have already received a high school diploma, or students between the ages of 18 and 21 who have not indicated they will enroll in any educational program. Other provisions of House Bill 1191 address the sensitivity of information regarding student juvenile offenses, including the sharing of a student's controlled substance violation with certain staff. You may recall the board adopted policy revisions around that change in law previously. The revisions contained within House Bill 1191 make that particular revision to the notification to staff to preserve that privacy of our students. This provision is intended to assuage parental concerns about the impact that notification of such offenses may have on a student's relationship with teachers and their students' scholastic career. Proposed revisions to policy 3121, enrollment and attendance records, have been reviewed by legal counsel and the superintendent's executive cabinet prior to tonight's meeting.
Thank you. I have a general question on policies, which jumped out at me when I was taking a look at this one. At the bottom, we have the different dates where changes are made to policies. What is the difference between a revision and an update?
Yeah. A revision is a change to the language that substantially alters the intent of the policy or its practice. An update would be changes of legal references. For example, on the screen right now, you can see in bold, we've added RCW 28A 225-216. That alone, if that was the only change we would need to do, would be considered an update.
Great, thank you for that explanation. I don't have a question on this policy, but I did notice that the first sentence and the last sentence are exactly the same, I believe. And I don't know if that was just an oversight or added for extra emphasis.
The last sentence within the policy itself?
Yes.
I will double check the revision just to make sure it is accurate. And if I need to make revisions, I will make sure to put it in the Friday report for the board's notification.
Okay, great. Thank you. Do other directors have questions, comments? Hearing none, we will go ahead and move policy 3121 to second reading, which takes us to 13.02, policy 3122, attendance.
Thank you. Revisions to policy 3122, attendance, respond to emergency rules adopted by OSPI that define a student's absence in the context of remote instruction and address daily attendance taking in the remote learning environment. The emergency rules also offer an expanded list of excused absence categories specific to the COVID-19 pandemic, provide a new non-truancy absence code, and address tiered supports for students accruing absences. You may see in those supports that were identified within policy revision, the tiered response system for student absences is reflective of the practices we've had in Everett Public Schools now for going on 4 years. I just would like to point that out. The emergency rules are already in effect and will remain in effect for the 2020-21 school, the 2020-21 school year. Proposed revisions to policy 3122 attendance have been reviewed by legal counsel and the superintendent's executive cabinet prior to tonight's meeting.
I just have one simple concern. When we have students who are either in daycare and not at home, or staying with relatives or friends and not at home with a parent, and they may need support from their parent in order to get online, how are we working with those families to ensure that kids have access and have the right supervision so that they can attend classroom online?
Director Lassane, first of all, we, as you know, in our reports have been distributing quite a number of hotspots and laptops across our district. And I believe in the last report, 17,500 laptops have been distributed to students. That is our access piece in terms of the technology to the internet, to our online learning environments through Canvas. Second to that, with daycares and other offsite providers, whether you're in a daycare setting or at home or friend's house, access to internet is number one. So as long as that's in place and students have devices, they can access our learning remotely. I am aware that our early learning team has met with local daycare providers and other agencies where students who are within Everett Public Schools boundaries are being watched during the day, right, while parents are at work, but engaging with our district devices to do remote learning. And so recently, local service providers have received presentation from Early Learning Department on how to help students access our learning online. In addition to that, if Dr. Boughton would like to jump in, we also have been working with the YMCA to provide those on-site services that YMCA have in our different locations within the district sites. We are providing paraeducator support to help students get online and to access learning during the day at our school sites.
But how are we, like, if Johnny was staying with the neighbor across the street who happens to be home during the day, and maybe that neighbor doesn't provide the adult supervision necessary, how are we communicating the need to be more engaged, or the student to be engaged online? Because not all kids will go to daycare. Not all kids, you know, that their parents work, maybe going to daycare or to schools. And so how are we ensuring or talking with parents and explaining the need to be engaged?
Pam, could I jump in and just ask for a little clarification of what you're trying to better understand? Is there a specific piece of this policy that concerns you, or are you just have more concern about student engagement in general?
The student engagement in general, as well as the need to be able to report absences. Because what I don't want to have happen is when Johnny doesn't have supervision from an adult, he's marked as absent from school.
Yeah, and so Dr. Boughton, I think I'll take a stab at this, and then if you would like to jump in. So Director Lassane, as I understand your question, if a student is not engaging in learning as defined in the revisions to this policy for attendance on a daily basis, right? What are schools doing to communicate with families to identify, one, your student is not engaging in online instruction, and two, how can we support them? That is the work that's going on each day in our schools. When we are finishing running our attendance the morning of the next day, of remote learning to make sure we're capturing both synchronous and asynchronous participation. Once those reports are done and put in, those are distributed within the school for school administrators, counselors, para-eds, and other staff to follow up with families to see how we can support their students to engage in learning, given the unique different home environments that students are placed in. To make sure that each student who is in Everett Public Schools is engaged each day. And that work is an ongoing and daily piece of our jobs to make sure that every student is learning.
Thank you.
And I have a question kind of on the heels of Director Lissane's. I actually got a call today from a parent who was concerned because their child has been in school every day, has not missed a day on Zoom, but there's a lot of talk about engagement, right? Just like being engaged, and are they engaged? And so they were under the impression, like, so does that mean, because they're also being given the seesaw work afterwards, right? Like just to go again, to show engagement. It looks like it's an and or in terms of policy and as it relates to truancy, but they were concerned of like, oh my gosh, if we're not doing all of this stuff every day, even if my kid's on Zoom, but they're not checking that box of engagement post Zoom, that in some way they would be dinged down the road. And so a couple questions. One is what's the deal with that? And then two, are we using too subjective a language when we start talking about engagement? Because what engagement means to one family or one parent might be just something else to another family, as well as to our educators and how they're using it.
Well, Director Berg, I heard your concern first. They're concerned that it is the procedure within Everett Public Schools that we've shared with our staff to make sure they're capturing both asynchronous and synchronous participation, right, during the school day. And I believe that's been shared with the board, what that process is. If it has not, I'd be happy to have Dr. Scott jump in on that.
I can jump in. I didn't mean to cut you off, Larry, at all.
Okay.
But Director Berg, to your question about whether it's engagement or participation, the definition of attendance is evidence of student participation. It's not an and, or it's daily logins or daily interaction or evidence of participation in a task.
So just to clarify on that one point, so if I've got child X and they're on Zoom, doing their thing, but later that day they're supposed to complete assignment X and they don't, are they, for that day, are they considered present? Are they considered engaged?
They're considered present because
Okay.
the attendance definition is about participation, not engagement. So the official definition says nothing of engagement, although we want students engaged clearly.
We do, absolutely. But I think it's that stress factor as a parent, right? Like because we all know if you give us 5 days of work, we might do it all on day 4. But are we being dinged on day 2 and 3? And so I think being super clear about that, and that's what I meant about that word engagement being kind of subjective. So I just want all of our parents to know they're doing awesome, right? If their kiddo's getting on Zoom and they're doing what they can, that's awesome. And I'm wondering how we can change that language, because I think to Director Lissane's point, we don't want folks trying as hard as they can to do what they can and still feeling like they're being left behind.
I think, and I just would like to chime in just really quickly, is that I also think that the policy and the emergency rule has given us the elasticity so that we can better meet the needs of diverse families we have some families who work all day and are only able to support their students at night. So that's when they're able to engage in the work. And some kids who are online every day on the Zoom, but maybe not deeply engaging in the work as much as we'd like to. So in some of the conversations I've had with some of our parent constituents is being able to bring it back to the building site and encouraging that to reach out to the principal if what's being delivered to students isn't meeting that student's needs, either they're not able to participate on a Zoom, or they're able to participate but they're not deeply engaging in it, is helping to navigate that at the site with the principal and the teacher, or the people who know the student the very best, I think is beneficial. And we've been able to really help tailor in the support that different families need to help optimize student engagement and participation well within the policy and the emergency rule for attendance as well. So I just wanted to chime that one in.
Well, see, my biggest concern was that one paragraph, monitoring daily attendance data for all students who are absent from remote learning, whether excused or unexcused. And my concern was for those whose kids are not in a daycare facility, who are not in, the parents are not home, and they happen to be at the neighbor across the street who happens to be home that day, and they're not online. What are we doing to ensure that they realize that's an absence? Or what are they, you know, and if that continues for many, many days, that student, you know, could be truant, you know.
Absolutely.
And so we don't want that student to get to that place. We want to make sure we provide some type of resources or some type of a report to the parent that says, you know, this is important.
And I think that what Mr. Fleckenstein was explaining is that we have support staff in the building so that when we're pulling attendance reports of this student didn't engage either synchronously or asynchronously, we're not sure what's happening. We have support staff in the buildings that are making those phone calls. In fact, you know, I know that some are going out and doing site visits, like doing a home visit to say, hey, how can we help? How can we reach out to the parent? I know that there are counselors and principals who are making those phone calls in the evening time so that they can reach a family. So there are some systems that we've built in to support students and families to capture just that very thing Director was saying.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, I think we're gonna move on from this policy, and I did not hear directors requesting changes to language, so I'm gonna recommend that we move it to second reading. Policy 3122, attendance. And then that takes us to 13.04, policy 3414, infectious diseases.
Right. Well, proposed revisions to policy 3414, infectious diseases, are minor in scope, and they update the policy to reflect official health guidance related to COVID-19. And as you can see, there's very little updates here to this one. Revisions to policy 3414, infectious diseases, have been reviewed by legal counsel and the superintendent's executive cabinet prior to tonight's meeting.
Directors, any questions regarding these small updates? We'll go ahead and move this one as well. Policy 3414, infectious diseases, to second reading. Takes us to 13.05, policy 3510, associated student bodies.
Yes, revisions to policy 3510, associated student bodies, or ASB, are provided this evening to address House Bill 6110, participation of students who are low income in extracurricular activities. The legislation requires districts now that collect fees for extracurricular participation, and in Everett Public Schools, that's typically through our ASB, or fees associated with the ASB program, to adopt a policy that includes provisions for both waiving and reducing such participation fees for students who are eligible for the free and reduced price meals program. And while this practice here and the revision to policy is in front of you now, as we've shared in our fee schedule changes in the past with the board, we've been engaging in this practice of reducing or eliminating fees for free and reduced price lunch qualifying students for the last several years. Proposed revisions to policy 3510, associated student bodies, have been reviewed by legal counsel and the superintendent's executive cabinet prior to tonight's meeting, and is a demonstration of our commitment to equity in Everett Public Schools.
Thank you. Directors, are there any questions?
I just have one question, if that's okay. How are we communicating to the families of these students that this is in practice? And that's one question. The second question is, a lot of kids, because I was embarrassed to be free and reduced lunch, might not speak up at the ASB office. They might just opt out. But I believe there is an adult at those ASB offices where the fees are collected, so it's not a breach of confidentiality with another student knowing. But how do we encourage, or are we encouraging our students to still seek out participation because there is assistance for them in a kind and sensitive way.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that when a student expresses interest in an activity or is maybe engaging with the counselor or administrator about their interests within school as part of just our counseling program or their high school and beyond plan, we always communicate with our students, about whether there's a need or any barriers that we can help them with. In terms of a broader communication to the entire school, that is something we can definitely work on with students, but in general,
or at least to the families of the kids who are free and reduced lunch, that something could be communicated to them, the opportunities available to their students.
And that is something that I think we can engage with our categorical director about the communications that go out to our families as notices of supports, in addition to the free and reduced lunch program for families.
Yeah, because I'm just taking it from a personal perspective. There were a lot of things I opted out of because I did not even know to inquire if support was available all the way through high school. That I just, I didn't know that when I tried out for volleyball and all these uniforms, I just said, oh, I can't do it. And nobody ever shared with me, and I never inquired, so I don't know if it was available. So that's why I want to make sure that if there aren't fees or barriers for the free and reduced lunch kids, they know there are no fees or barriers.
Yeah, well, that's excellent feedback, Director Mitchell, and I can work with our administrators on how to do that more effectively for our students.
Yes, thank you. Just because it is. I'm always thinking about the shy kid, like I was, who's not going to ask for help.
I've got a question. Well, and I also echo what Director Mitchell was saying. There's so many problems, I think, on the South End about how we communicate some of these things when we deal with free and reduced lunch and kids in transition opportunities, because there's just this thought of everybody is of means on the South End when it's just not the case. So that's probably another conversation once we get back to normal. But I do have a question about ASB. And it's not specific to this policy, but there was a bill passed last session where you would have the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number printed on ASB cards. I'm assuming we didn't have that done this year just because there wasn't time, but I'm wondering, is that something on your radar, Dr. Fleckenstein, or?
Well, I appreciate you calling me Dr. Fleckenstein, but I haven't.
Oh, sorry. I just assume everybody in the district is doctor.
I'm working on it. But,
I'm the least educated one on the board. I'm the only one on the board with no master's or doctorate. So.
That is something that me personally, I'm not aware of. However, Director Polk might have already been made aware of that. So I will follow up on that to make sure. Because we haven't taken pictures for ASB cards at this time, we haven't printed them yet. So I will follow up on that. Thank you for letting me know.
Well, I will tell you, my 9th grader was mortified when she got her ASB card for it's using her 8th grade picture. So yes, I explained to her because of COVID, that's the way it is. But it's this being National Suicide Prevention Month, it would be wonderful to at least know when that's going to happen, because I think it's going to be important for our kiddos to have that number readily available.
You can tell her that they were just trying to keep your age down. Most women
right? That's what I thought. I would have loved. It's like, please use a picture from years ago for all of my stuff. So yeah, she wasn't that happy.
Any further questions? Well, I appreciate Director Mitchell and Burke's input. Thank you for that on this policy in particular. Okay, hearing no changes, or are you going to be looking into I wasn't sure if there was actually requested changes or not on this one.
To my understanding, the feedback we received were not directly related to any revision to language in the policy.
Thank you for clarifying that. We will go ahead and move policy 3510 to second reading and move to 13.06, policy 4300, limiting immigration enforcement in schools. And this is a new policy for us.
Yes, the proposed new policy 4300, limiting immigration enforcement in schools, is provided for the board's consideration this evening to comply with Senate Bill 5497, which with the purpose of ensuring that the state of Washington remains a place where the rights and dignity of all residents are maintained and protected in order to keep Washington working. Washington's Office of Attorney General was asked to develop guidance for limiting immigration enforcement to the fullest extent possible and permissible at courthouses, publicly operated health facilities, shelters, and public schools. As a result, RCW 4310-310 has been revised. Washington's public schools are recognized as special institutions. Public schools have a legal and moral obligation to ensure that no one is denied the opportunity to succeed because of where they were born. This proposed new policy is a reproduction of the Attorney General's Office model in its entirety. This particular new policy also aligns to the recent board resolution 1237. Proposed new policy 4300, limiting immigration enforcement in schools, has been reviewed by legal counsel and the superintendent's executive cabinet prior to tonight's meeting.
Thank you. I know we captured the gist of this policy elsewhere in a previous policy, but I'm just so pleased to see such level of detail that we can now put into effect. And we were practicing, this at. So are there any questions or comments from directors?
Just one point, because Caroline, you just said it. Is this replacing another policy? Because I remember voting or discussing this before.
Mm-hmm.
That
I'm going to go. Yeah, Director Mitchell, I'm going to go off my memory right now, so I know I'm going to look it up right after this. But I believe it's 4411, which is our relationship with law enforcement agencies, is where this language has popped up before. That language does not conflict. That particular policy's language does not conflict with anything contained within this new policy.
That's what I remembered, because I believed we had a policy of who was allowed and that immigration is not allowed.
I would say that the revisions we made to 4411 preceded this model WASDA model policy.
Yes.
To make a firm stance about our belief of the sanctity of schools.
Perfect, thank you.
That is now captured in this.
And that we have a responsibility to educate all children.
Yes.
Okay, hearing no further comments, we will go ahead and move new policy 4300, limiting immigration enforcement in schools, to second reading.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fleckenstein, for all your detailed information and answers. Greatly appreciated. That takes us to 14.0 in our agenda, upcoming agenda items, and Dr. Salzman is going to provide an overview.
Thank you. At the September 25th regular meeting, the board will participate in the Washington State Schools Directors Association General Assembly. And turn over to the chair right now. You might want to just have a few minutes to discuss how you want to proceed with that on Friday.
Thank you. It is my understanding that the boardroom, or a room downstairs in the CRC, has been reserved. 4 directors are planning to attend, and I believe the thought was, if we can appropriately social distance and mask up, that we could have an opportunity to discuss different topics as they came up throughout the day.
And that was sort of my hope. That's what I had proposed, because if we're all in 4 different places and only one board member maybe take part at a time, but there would be an opportunity for each of us to take part. But how would you coordinate that using open public meeting in 4 different places? So if everybody would like to come in, Darlene, I think, is arranging it with Jared. It is a very long day, but maybe Darlene could help provide us with some food or something. And that this way, though, we could talk through things when it came up.
Director Nichols, you want to chime in, and Director Lassane?
I can definitely be there. I am going to be in and out that day at least once in the afternoon, just for previous appointments and stuff like that. But
and I do too. I have to sort of step away just a little bit too for it's still work. But I figure, I can always go out in the lobby or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's doing things face to face, as it were, 6 feet apart or more is probably better than trying to coordinate texting everybody or emailing everybody between things.
Yeah.
So.
And that's what I just figured. It's like the whole open public meeting.
I have no problem coming in. I think that would be a good opportunity for us to coordinate our discussions. And I think it would be hard on the Zoom for the whole day.
Okay.
And
And
just-
then Darlene, is it reasonable for like a lunch order and if we're still there for dinner? Sometimes these days go by really fast, but they're pushing like 3 half days or 2 full days, two and a half full days into one day. But it's a very long day, but for, lunches or a dinner, depending on how long it goes.
I do have an evening event that I have to attend here at home, but
Oh, that's fine. It's hopefully we get done early with the voting or everybody just goes, yeah, Tracy, you're good.
Yeah, I can provide lunch. I can send you guys orders for box lunches. And we can do that. And then we can play dinner by ear.
Perfect.
Unless you wanted to pre-order dinner as well.
And what times is it? It starts at 8 o'clock, is that correct?
Yeah, it starts at 8. And then I think there's several like half-hour breaks in the day and the agenda. And Darlene, usually when we go, it is a very, very large book of things, but if we could have it in paper, because usually WASDA will print it for us when we're there. I hate asking you and Jamie one more thing, but it is easier, I think, for me to read ahead and to see all of them when we do the priorities. For those that haven't been to the WASDA meetings before, they want us going through all of their priorities and legislative things to rate for the district, our top 15. So having all of those available to look at would be most helpful.
The thing is, there's only one voter, and I think you're the only voter, right?
Oh no, we can have the pre-call was 1 voter per district at a time. And so that we're all going to want to discuss any of the how do we want to vote, and having the documents in front of us, because when we list the priorities, that can be us as a group.
So just an FYI, it is all on the WASDA website. I spent some time going through some of the positions a couple days ago. So there is an opportunity prior to getting together on Friday to take a look at that as well.
Yeah, but it is a lot of pages to scroll through versus flip through. I mean, it's just everybody's preference, I guess.
Do you want those ahead of time, the printout?
I'm okay without a printout.
I didn't hear the question. Sorry, it was kind of muted.
Tracy, do you want the printout ahead of time?
Yeah, Darlene, it's kind of hard to hear you. Yeah, if we could have maybe at least 1 printout, that would be lovely.
She asked if you wanted it ahead of time as well, if there was a need.
I don't need it ahead of time because I've looked at it online. It's just the day of.
Okay.
Can you make, while you're making her printout, just go ahead and make 2, and I'm going to take a look at it online prior to that, get that in my mind, and then just to look at it there, just in case, we lose connective, we can't look at it online. It's good to have something in writing that you can flip through.
Director Nichols, would you like a printout?
But yeah, I don't see why we couldn't, share them. I don't see we need to kill a whole forest for this one day of meetings. So, 1 or 2 to me is fine.
The way we have the meeting set up is that you'll be able to actually, Tracy, log in as the voting delegate, and we can have all 4 of you 6 feet apart, spaced in the boardroom. So you'll all be visible and you'll all be able to talk. We'll have one of you control the actual mute and camera, but then you'll all be part of one thing. And then you can all bring your laptops. You can have the ability to scroll through and look at those things as you're in the meeting. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, I think we're all set. Are there any other details, Director Mitchell, we should be aware of?
No, I just appreciate this time to discuss it and
Yeah.
be together on Friday, and we will do virtual hugs because I miss everybody so much. And any district people in the building, please come by and say hi. I just miss everybody.
I'll be there virtually, so I'm sorry to miss it.
Hey, Darlene, I think something's covering your microphone or something because I cannot hear you.
Try that. Is that better?
Okay. I think we're done with Darlene for now. She's going to provide us paper copy and some lunch, and she sounds like she's on top of working with Jared to get us set up. Okay, Dr. Salzman, let's move to 14.02
Thank you.
meeting.
Thank you. At the September 25th regular meeting, we will discuss the following. The COVID Fall 2020 reopening update, as we promised to give you an update. Strategic plan refresh process. And our regular meeting on October 13th, 2020, we'll discuss social emotional support update, several policies for second reading, WASDA General Assembly debrief, capital planning, out of endorsement improvement, library instruction material surplus, and board agenda structure. Thank you.
Director Caroline, can I also just, if the students want to come on Friday for any part to wander in and out based on class, I think it might be nice if they could come see.
Okay. You have an invitation to join us. And if you need further detail, go ahead and send Darlene an email, and she can provide you with more details on a schedule. Or maybe, Darlene, could you just send those out? Okay, thank you. Okay, we are now moving to section 15.0, which is executive closed session. And tonight we do have, it's getting dark in my room. I need a light. We do have an executive session to discuss with legal counsel representing the agency litigation or potential litigation to which the agency is or is likely to become a party. The anticipated length of the executive session is 15 minutes. No action may be taken during an executive session. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye to many of you. And I believe all the directors have a separate link that you can log out of this link, this Zoom meeting, and then log into the executive session. And then when we're completed, I'll come back and close out the meeting with this link as well. So thank you everyone for being here this evening, all your information, and yeah, great meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Hi there.
Hello.
What's everyone having for dinner tonight?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Do you guys have people at home cooking for you?
Hmm.
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah, how about you? Are you cooking?
I'm not cooking. I do about 99% of the cooking in our house. But I went to the grocery store and got something easy for the boys to put together, being my husband and my son. Maybe the dog will help. Who knows? Okay, I hereby adjourn this meeting.
Okay.
Was that formal
Great
enough?
night.
Okay, we'll
Have a
talk to
good
both of you
night.
soon. Okay,
Bye-bye.
Good
Thank you.
bye-bye.